The sun sets behind Telescope Peak, but in Death Valley, it dies on the Black Mountains. That is the last thing that happens out on the salt each day. The light climbs the face of those mountains to the east, and it goes gold, and then it goes a deep burned red, and then it is gone. And for most of my life, I thought it was one of the most beautiful things a person could stand and watch. I still do, mostly, but there is a part of me that has learned to flinch at it now, because that light on the Black Mountains is also a clock. And one evening that summer, it ran out for two people while I was walking across a parking lot toward a car that should not still have been there. By the time the red reached the top of the range, they had been gone for a while, and the whole day that led to it could have been undone at any of a dozen moments by one decision that costs nothing, that they were offered over and over, and that they turned down every single time with the same four words. We do not need water. Welcome back to Doomed Departures. What you are about to hear is a composite story. It is built from real heat, real ground temperatures, real distances, and the real and specific way this valley finishes people who treat the hottest place on the planet like a scenic pullout. But the two people at the center of it are an invention, assembled from too many summers of watching the same confidence walk out onto the same salt. No real person is named. I am a composite too, a dramatization of every ranger who has ever stood at the edge of that basin and offered a bottle of water to somebody who laughed at it. This is Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, 282 feet below sea level. And I need you to understand what that place actually is before we start, because almost everything people believe about it is wrong in a way that gets them killed. Badwater does not look dangerous. That is the whole problem, and it is the same problem every single time. It looks like a parking lot, a boardwalk, and a huge flat white plain that stretches to the mountains, and it looks, to a person, stepping out of an air-conditioned car, like a place you walk out onto. Take your photograph and walk back from 15 minutes, easy, done. There is a boardwalk that carries you the first little way out onto the salt, and past the end of it, the white flat just keeps going, mile after mile, hard and bright and strangely inviting. And people look at it and their brains file it as a beach. A weird salt beach, something ordinary, and they walk out onto it in the middle of the afternoon with a phone and no water, because the car is right there, because how far could you possibly get? Here is what that white flat actually is. It is a furnace floor. The air that day was 120 degrees, and the air is not the thing that kills you out there. The salt is. That white crust sits under a vertical sun all day with nothing to shade it and nothing to cool it, and it absorbs that heat and holds it and radiates it back up. And the surface temperature of the ground out on that flat can run 30, 40, in the worst conditions close to 50 degrees hotter than the air. So the number on the sign said 120, and the number under their feet, the number that actually mattered, was far higher than that. And it was climbing all afternoon, and it does not appear on any sign anywhere, because there is no way to make a person believe it until they are standing in it. And by then, it is too late to matter. And the place is actively lying to your eyes the whole time. High on the cliff above the parking lot, there is a small sign that marks sea level, so far up the rock face that people crane their necks to find it. And the point of it is that the entire basin you are about to walk into sits underneath an ocean that is not there. People photograph that sign and laugh and walk out onto the salt, and they never connect that the reason it is the hottest place on the continent and the reason that sign is so high above their heads are the same reason. And out on the flat, in the afternoon, the heat itself becomes visible. The far edge of the salt dissolves into a shimmer, a wet silver mirage that looks like standing water, and it recedes as you walk toward it, always the same distance away, a lake that does not exist, pulling people farther out onto the one surface that will not let them come back. They arrived in the early afternoon, which is the worst possible time, the part of the day when the salt has been loading heat for hours and has not yet begun to give any of it back. Two of them, one in a bright top and one in another, and I am not going to make this about how they looked, because how they looked had nothing to do with what happened. And the lazy version of this story that makes fun of tourists misses the entire point. They were not stupid. They were confident, which is different and much more dangerous, because stupidity gets corrected by the world and confidence argues with it. They had driven a long way. They were excited. They wanted the shot everybody wants, the two of them out on that endless white with the mountains behind, and they wanted it right now. and they were not going to be slowed down by a man in a flat hat telling them about the weather. That man was me. Rung one of this was me at the end of the boardwalk doing the job. I saw them come out with no water, and I did what I always do, which is not lecture, because lecturing bounces off people like this, but offer. I told them, plainly and without drama, that it was 120 degrees, that the ground was much hotter than that, and that if they were going out past the boardwalk, they needed water, and that I had cold water right there, and they were welcome to it. And one of them smiled at me, the friendly, dismissive smile I have seen 10,000 times, and said the 4 words, "We do not need water. We are just going out for a few minutes." And they kept walking, out past the end of the boardwalk, onto the open salt, into the worst of it, at the worst time, carrying nothing. I want to tell you about the ground under them, because it is the first thing I had warned about and the first thing that fired. The soles of ordinary shoes are not built for a surface that hot. People think of their feet as protected, and on any normal ground they are. But out on that salt, the heat comes up through a thin sole faster than people expect, and it does not feel like anything at first, and then it feels like too much all at once. They did not notice it for a while. That is how it works. The damage accumulates before the sensation arrives, and by the time a person out on that flat thinks, "My feet are getting hot," they have already been standing on a griddle for longer than was safe, and the walk back is now a walk across the same griddle, and it is not shorter than the walk out. And the salt is not the soft white powder it looks like from the boardwalk. Up close, it is a hard, jagged crust of crystallized ridges, sharp enough to score a boot. So a person out there is not strolling on sand, they are walking on broken glass that happens to be on fire. And the two things together, the cutting and the cooking, mean that when the feet finally do fail, they fail completely. And a person who cannot use their feet in the middle of that basin is no longer walking anywhere at all. Rung 2 came off the salt toward them, a family heading back to the boardwalk, sunburned and quiet and moving with the particular slowness of people who have just learned something about that place. The father said something to them as they passed, the way people do, told them it was brutal out there, that they had not gone as far as they wanted, that the couple should not go far. And I watched the couple thank him and keep walking, and I watched them do the thing that people who are about to die out there almost always do, which is decide that the warning was about the other person's weakness and not about the place. That family had turned back, so the couple read the family as people who could not handle it, and read themselves, by contrast, as people who could. Every person who came off that salt-looking beaten made them more certain, not less. That is the trap of confidence. It converts other people's good sense into evidence of your own superiority. Rung 3 came from one of their own. A little farther out, a solo hiker heading back in passed close to them, and this one did more than mutter a warning. This one stopped and held out a spare bottle, an unopened one, and told them to take it, that they did not look like they were carrying anything, and it was a long way back in that heat. It was the second time in 20 minutes that a stranger had tried to physically put water into their hands, and they waved it off. Friendly as ever, said they were nearly done, said they had some in the car, which was true and completely useless because water in a car half a mile away across a furnace is not water, it is a rumor. The hiker did the only thing a stranger can do, which is offer and be refused and carry the refusal back in with them. And that hiker was the last person to speak to them who was not me on a radio. And the water they turned down was, as far as anyone can reconstruct it, the exact amount that would have bought them the walk back. They were maybe a third of a mile out when the second physiology beat fired, and it fired as good news, which is the cruelest way it comes. One of them said something to the other about not even sweating, about how it was not as bad as everyone said, how they were fine. And they believed it, because in air that dry, your sweat evaporates the instant it reaches the surface of your skin. So you never feel wet, never feel like you are working, never get the soaked, dripping, laboring signal that your whole life has taught you to read as too hot. You feel, if anything, cool and dry and comfortable right up until you do not. So they were losing water fast, faster than they had ever lost it in their lives, more than a liter an hour each, and their bodies were telling them everything was fine. Because the one gauge a human being has for this, the feeling of sweating, had been switched off by the dryness of the air. Not sweating out there is not a sign of strength. It is the first sign that you are in trouble. And they read it exactly backward, and there was nobody out there on the salt with them to say so, because they had left the last person who would have behind on the boardwalk. Let me stop and ask you something, because this one is not really about the desert. When was the last time you took the fact that you felt fine as proof that you were fine? Not a considered judgment, just the feeling. The drive where you were sure you were awake enough to keep going. The situation you stayed in because nothing had gone wrong yet. Tell me in the comments, because that is the exact instrument that failed them out there. Feeling fine is not information. In that place, it is the specific LIE. The heat tells you while it works, and the people who trust it are the people I go looking for at closing time. By the time they reached the point where turning back was still free, they did not turn back because nothing in their bodies was telling them they needed to. This is the hinge of the whole thing, and it is the hinge of almost every one of these. There is a moment out on that salt, well before the crisis, when a person has gone far enough that the return trip will cost them dearly, but they can still absolutely make it. Still have the water reserves and the coordination and the judgment to turn around and walk out under their own power. That moment does not feel like a deadline. It feels like the best part of the trip. They were out on the open white, the mountains were huge around them, they had their shot, they felt strong, and turning around at that moment would have felt insane, would have felt like quitting something they were winning. So they went a little farther. Everybody goes a little farther. The last safe moment is disguised, every single time, as the moment you feel most like continuing. Then the third beat fired, the one about the core, and this is where the day quietly stopped being survivable. A human body in heat is not holding a steady temperature that snaps back. It is running a losing account, taking on heat from the sun and the ground in its own effort faster than it can shed it, and the only ways to make a withdrawal to give heat back are shade and water and rest, and out on that salt. At that hour, there is no shade, there was no water, and rest just means standing still on a surface that is cooking you. So their core temperatures were climbing slowly, steadily, with nothing available to bring them back down. And once that climb passes a certain point, it does not reverse on its own, not without real cooling, not without help. And there was no help within a mile and no way for them to know that the line had been crossed, because the thing that crossing that line takes from you first is the ability to tell that you have crossed it. That is the fourth beat, and it is the one that turns a rescue into a recovery. When the core gets hot enough, the brain is the organ that suffers first, and it does not suffer in a way that announces itself. Judgment goes. The specific ability to look at your own situation from the outside and correctly decide that you are in danger and need to act is not the last thing the heat takes. It is one of the first. So the version of a person who is capable of saving themselves, the one who could look around and say we need to go back right now, is gone long before the person stops walking. What is left keeps making decisions, but they are the decisions of someone whose judgment has been quietly removed, and out there those decisions are often the wrong ones, and there's nobody to overrule them. I know how this part went because of what the recovery told us, and I am going to tell it to you gently, because those two people had families, and this channel does not turn a person's worst hour into a spectacle. They got separated, not far. But confusion does that. It frays the thing that keeps two people together, and one of them ended up a little apart from the other, and there was a phone found later that had been dropped and not picked up, which is the fifth beat, the coordination going, the hands and the attention no longer doing simple things, because a body in that state is pulling resources back to the core and away from everything it has decided is not essential. And picking up a dropped phone is not essential to survival, so it does not happen. Somewhere in there, one of them, we believe, felt cold. That is the last sign. The chills in 120 degrees, the body's temperature control giving up its last honest reading, and it means the argument is over. And there is no more coaching and no more convincing after that. There is only whether help arrives, and help did not know to come. Because here is the thing about that basin. Nobody was expecting them anywhere. They had told me they would be 15 minutes, but they had told me that the way you tell a stranger anything, and I cannot follow every confident person who walks past me onto the salt, or I would never do anything else. They had not logged a plan. Nobody at a hotel was waiting on them by a certain hour. The one thread connecting them to rescue was a thing they did not know existed, and it was me and my routine and the clock. At closing, I checked the lot. That is the job at the end of the day, the last thing. Driving the pullouts and the trailhead lots as the light goes, looking for the cars that are still there when they should not be, because a car still in the lot at Badwater at closing is not a car. It is a question. And that evening, with the sun already climbing the Black Mountains and going gold, there was one car still in the Badwater lot, and I knew before I was out of my truck. I had checked their water at the boardwalk that afternoon. I remembered the smile. And I stood in that lot as the gold went to red on the mountains, calling it in, knowing that the light I was looking at was the same light they had walked out under hours before, and that the distance between a 15-minute photo and a car alone in a lot at sunset was 4 words and a bottle of water they would not take. That is the lifeline, and I want to be honest about it because people always want the rescue to be the story. The rescue was never going to be the story. By the time a car alone in a lot becomes a question somebody asks, the answer to that question was decided hours earlier out on the salt. At the moment, 2 people felt strong and dry and fine and kept walking. The most anyone could have done for them was done at the boardwalk at 2 in the afternoon by a man holding out a bottle of water, and they said no, and everything after that was just the desert keeping the appointment they had made without meaning to. They were found out on the flat, and the ruling was heat-related, and there is no date and no name in this, and there never will be, because they were people and not a case file. I will tell you one thing about where they were found, and only because it teaches something. They were not that far out. That is what nobody believes. People imagine you have to go miles, that these things happen to people who push deep into some remote backcountry, and the truth is so much smaller and so much worse. They were close enough that on a cool morning it would have been a pleasant, easy, nothing walk. The distance did not kill them. The heat did, and the hour and the ground and the 4 words. The distance was almost trivial. That is the part that should frighten you, because it means the margin out there is not measured in miles. It is measured in whether you carried water, and whether you went out at the right time, and whether, when a stranger offered you the one thing that would have kept you alive, you were too certain to take it. If any of this reached you, then do the small thing that carries it to the next person, about to walk onto that salt with a phone and nothing else. Like this video so it finds somebody in a parking lot instead of a comment section. Subscribe so you are here for the next one. Not for me and not for a number on a screen. Do it so that one more person, somewhere, takes the bottle of water that the man in the flat hat is holding out even though they are sure they do not need it. Because the ones who are sure they do not need it are the exact ones who do. Here is the whole of it, and I have watched a lot of sunsets on those mountains while I have tried to find the words. That place does not kill people with its distance or its remoteness or any of the dramatic things people picture. It kills them with a feeling. It gives them the feeling of being fine, hands it to them for free, right up until the end, because the heat switches off every warning a body has, the sweat and the thirst and the judgment one by one, so that a person can be walking to their death feeling strong and dry and confident the entire way. That is the whole lethality of that basin. Not that it feels bad, that it feels good for far too long, and by the time it feels bad, the choice that mattered is hours behind you at the end of a boardwalk. They felt fine. They were not fine. And the space between those two things is exactly wide enough for a person to walk out onto the salt and not walk back. I still watch the light on the Black Mountains at the end of every day out there. I still think it is beautiful. But I check the lot first now, every time, before I let myself look at it, because I learned that summer that the sunset is not just the most beautiful part of the day in Death Valley. It is also the deadline, the one the title of this never lets you forget. And there are people out on that salt right now this afternoon, feeling strong and dry and certain, who do not know that the light climbing those mountains is counting down to something, and that the only thing standing between them and it is a bottle of water and the humility to take it while it is still being offered. Next time we leave the dry heat behind for the cold water, where the danger does not wait for sunset and does not lie to you for hours first, where it comes up to meet you in a matter of seconds and takes the strongest, most confident person on the trip before anybody else. Until then, the next time you are somewhere hard and beautiful and you feel completely fine, and somebody who knows the place better than you offers you something you are sure you do not need, take it. Feeling fine is not proof of anything out there. It is the most expensive feeling in the world, and it is free right up until the moment it costs you everything. This has been Doomed Departures. Stay safe, and we will see you on the next one.